tribulations, my heart, my balls, my somebody stop me, somebody come and get me. Little did I know that the Lord was riding with me. The law, the light, my heart, the fight, the wrong, the right is gone.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another JVS movie review. Today we are bringing you the latest from Sony's Spider-Man universe. You can call it a Spider-Man universe. This is the second villain of it. So yeah, this is Spider-Man universe. This one is Morbius, starring Jared Leto, Matt Smith, Adria, Jared Harris. This is directed by Daniel Espinosa, who is the director of, if you ever saw the movie Life, which is with Kristen Stewart, it's a really good movie. So this kind of feels like a natural progression that he would do something of this nature. So here's the quick synopsis of this. Biochemist Michael Morbius tries to cure himself of a rare blood disease, but when his experiment goes wrong, he is inadvertently infected himself with a form of vampirism instead. Quick first thoughts. Most people don't fully understand or know who Michael Morbius is. You kind of know if you've into the comic book world, or maybe if you are familiar with the 90s cartoon of Spider-Man, where you may have seen Michael Morbius a little bit in it. You would know of the character, but you're not really familiar of any form of an origin of this character, as I wasn't going into this movie. But what you quickly injected into is a fully realized vampire movie here. So if you're going into this film expecting the fun that you had with Venom, or anything or any trope that goes along with a regular comic book movie, you're not going to get it here. But if you go into this movie like, hey, this is a movie about a vampire, maybe I'm going to get those elements of vampire films, whether the good elements or the bad elements of vampire films, because there's so many of them. You get all of those elements in this film. Through and through, this is a genre-defining type of film. Because while it is in the comic book genre, because it is a comic book film, it is clearly a vampire horror film just as much, if not more, than it is a comic book film. So it can throw you off from the onset of the film. Like, we are introduced to the character Michael Morbius as he's entering in a cave, attempting to catch bats to try to cure his blood disease. Right after that, we're transported into the past, where it's kind of explained to us what's going on with him. We meet a friend of his who's played by Matt Smith, and there they give you enough foundation to bring you back to the present day. First flaw I'm going to give this film: its editing, moving from time frames, is not really good. But again, if you are expecting the superhero genre type of stuff, it could throw you off. But if you are accustomed to what you get in, especially vampire films, in horror films, it doesn't really bother you as much. And because the score, which I absolutely loved in this film, is so good, it can keep you enthralled into it, even in moments where the film kind of goes off the rails by attempting to interject too much comic book stuff into what could have been a straight, definite vampire film. And that's when you get the true flaws of it. Jared Leto's performance is great. If anything, even if you don't like the film, what you are left with is a performance that's so good that you now question what's next. You can grow in knowing that the character is at least in good hands from an acting standpoint, even if the film you feel may be sloppy. And that's what you get. You get a great performance by Jared Leto. Matt Smith is amazing. You play Michael Morbius' best friend in this film. He is having more fun than anybody else in almost any comic book movies since possibly Tom Hardy in the first Venom, where he has just taken on this character and taken on every aspect of this character, and he decided to have fun with it. At the same time, Michael Morbius, unlike Venom, does not interject those comedic moments, really. This is a straightforward horror, actually. And some of the violence in it is gruesome. Sometimes I question what this movie was rated because of what they were able to do. Again, it's a vampire movie. In the end, it's still a vampire movie. And if you go into it expecting maybe a more cartoonish form of a vampire movie, maybe Blade 2, where it is a vampire movie, but there's so much action going on in it, you kind of forget it's a vampire movie. That's not what you're going to get with Michael Morbius. This movie reminded me so much, and I know for some people this is a horrible movie to compare it to. Wes Craven made a movie called Dracula 2000. This movie reminded me so much in tone of Dracula 2000, just with an up budget. But even with this up budget, and at times its CGI in this film can get a little wonky, the effects as it pertains to Morbius and his abilities and his powers are great. I absolutely love them. Everything else around it, not so good. The practical effect of Michael Morbius also looks great. I think it was written that Jared Leto actually pushed for it to be non-CGI when he turned into Michael Morbius. And off of that alone, this movie looks great when that happens. The transition from himself to Michael Morbius is really good. The biggest issue with this film is that its plotting is all over the place. Again, from jumping different time zones, it jumps different moods. it goes from a horror to an odd drama at times to a dark comedy at times, and the transitions are never as smooth as you want them to be. And at times, it's not only not as smooth as you want it to be, you get lost in exactly what's happening, and it throws you off a little bit while you're watching the movie. But in the end, if you are a fan of vampire movies, if you're a fan of the vampire genre in general, this movie is going to fit possibly more of your taste than if you're a fan of a comic book film. Comic book films kind of follow the same trope. All of them do. This movie does not follow any of those tropes. Even Venom, which a lot of people felt was so different, it still followed those same tropes of comic book films. At no point in time does Michael Morbius' film follow any of those tropes. It is up and down. If I was to strip away any connection of you knowing that this character exists in comics, you would go in this movie and just say, oh, so this is a vampire movie. Like, those things don't exist where it overly puts in play that, like, hey, this is a comic book film. This is made for your enjoyment. At times you do question some of Michael Morbius' decisions in the film. But, again, from a horror vampire standpoint, they make perfectly good sense at times. It's just that when they go a little too wonky. And for a film that does not have a huge budget, I think this one's only budgeted around $70 million, some of the wonkiness is unnecessary. It's way too many slow motion shots in this film. That was not necessary to have that many slow motion shots to kind of show the evolution of his powers at times. You didn't need that many slow motion shots, and it kind of can take you out of the film when you get it. But again, this is one of the films where you're going to either absolutely love the vampire elements of it, or you're going to absolutely hate it. I can't tell you which one it's going to be because it really depends on your taste in film. For myself, I am a lover of horror films. I did not mind this. This is a film I can possibly watch again. But this is also a film that I can say is not really good. But it's entertaining enough from a horror standpoint to get by. And Jared Leto's performance is solid. It makes you wonder what's going to be next for Michael Morbius. Now, as it pertains to the two post-credit scenes, it just up for interpretation on what you were expecting here. I'm not going to talk about them because this is a non-spoiler review, but it does set up, I'm assuming, plans that Sony has moving forward with their Spider-Man universe. I don't necessarily know if it's going to be something people are going to like, but again, it kind of fits the mood of the movie. I don't know if people are going to like it. Daniel does a really good job in directing this film. Again, besides wonky CGI and very, very bad pacing and awful editing at times. Again, though, you feel while you're watching it that it's a good movie in here somewhere. A really good horror vampire movie that could have changed the scope of what you expect from comic book films. Instead, it's like At the same time, he wanted to make that film. He was fighting against himself, or maybe fighting against someone else, to make a different type of film. But at no point in time did you feel this film was attempting to appease a younger audience. This is not something that I would say anyone under 12 to 13 should see. You're not going to have fun with it. They're going to be scared of it. Literally, during my screening, there were critics there who was covering their eyes at certain scenes because of the things that Morbius does to people in the movie. So again, that's just something just to be aware of going into it, that you're actually going to get a real vampire film, not necessarily a comic book interpretation of what a vampire film is going to be. So, Morbius, again, brought to you by Sony Pictures. Out of a possible 10, I am going to give Morbius a 5.5 out of 10. Again, it's a solid vampire film. If you've seen one, you kind of seen them all. And this one is just a vampire film with a higher budget. So at times its effects looks better. Its actors are of a better class than what you may normally get from vampire films. But it falls into some of the same tropes and issues you get from all vampire films. It just also at times falls in some of the same tropes you may get from a comic book movie, which at times it can be irritating, but at other times, if you just lose yourself in it and say, you know what, I'm not here to overly criticize, I'm just here to have a fun time, I think you can thoroughly enjoy it. Again, if you're a fan of the vampire horror genre, if you are a fan of the comic book genre, this film possibly will not be for you. I don't know how comic book accurate it is. I am not overly knowledgeable of Michael Morbius' character, but it's a chance it's not going to be comic book accurate. But again, you're tuning in there to see Jared Leto's performance, and it leaves you with enough hope moving forward on what you're going to get from this character now that they're fully realized and you don't need a backstory anymore. This has been another JVS movie review. Peace, people.